And you've recently started talking about the darker paths of hyperbitcoinization. You say it's not going to be a walk in the park, and that it's like all revolutions. It's definitely going to bring light, but it has a very real possibility of bringing chaos, pain, and a lot of disorientation. And you've compared it to the Industrial Revolution, which gave us amazing things like steam power, electricity, global productivity, but also terrible things like slavery and world wars. So Bitcoiners, we can all see that Bitcoin has the capability to bring abundance, sovereignty, and this long-term thinking. But I think we often underestimate the risks involved and the unintended consequences. So can you talk a little bit about the darker paths that we haven't been really talking enough about in the Bitcoin space? And what can we do now to steer this transformation toward light instead of letting it become something dystopian?
Excellent question. Thank you for this. And as you underline yourself, the hopium is incredibly important. All these small Bitcoin meetups that we see around the world, this is what is important. People keeping the flame alive. We need to keep the flame alive. Alda says that there's no stopping this train, and there isn't, but we absolutely need to be, we cannot become complacent in this. Absolutely not. We cannot afford it. This is much too important. And there are risks involved. The hopium is great, and we need that, and we have needed it until now, but now we have reached the point of criticality, as Michael Saylor puts it, where the fusion reaction is self-sustaining now. Bitcoin doesn't need us in the same sense that it did before, but we're not out of the waters yet. The greatest risk with hyperbitcoinization is that it could become the very thing that we're trying to prevent. It could become this dystopian Orwellian surveillance tool. It's perfect for it. It's perfect for it. Bitcoin, as absolute mathematical scarcity, which I compare to a new constant, a new cosmological constant, a new constant in the universe, that will remain. The discovery of how to create or achieve absolute mathematical scarcity in the digital world through a sufficiently distributed network with consensus rules. That discovery will always remain. But what is at risk of being compromised is the ecosystem built on top of that discovery. And since there is a non-zero possibility of that happening, I see it could happen at some point in our future. And I can entertain the idea that Bitcoin, that we will ebb and flow through different use cases for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is always going to be here. The genie is out of the bottle. It's not going back in. Right now, we have a lot of hopium, and that is important because that means that we're building in that direction that we see. The hopium is important not just to keep the flame alive and continue to build the work, but it's important to shape the ideas that we have about Bitcoin for the future. And we need to have a healthy idea about what Bitcoin is going to be, because that is going to steer what we're building towards. And we also need to be cognizant of the darker paths that this could take. If the ecosystem built on top of absolute mathematical scarcity was hijacked, we could see an ecosystem that is used for surveillance. And it would be the most effective, efficient, detrimental surveillance system ever devised by humankind. Permanent, forever. And financial surveillance, your financial metadata is the most intimate data that you have. It says everything about you. It says not only where you live and where you spend your time and how you move around in society, which in itself can reveal so many things about you, just your movement and your timing as you move about in society. It tells you about your interactions. It tells you about what interests you have, what political ideas, or how spiritually evolved you are. Your financial data says everything about you. I would say that it's more revealing than your DNA. And if this is compromised, it would be one of the greatest threats to societal health we may have ever seen. It wouldn't be as bloody as the Industrial Revolution, but it would be a more pervasive disease that would be incredibly challenging to heal from once it's locked in. And yeah, you asked also, what can we do about this?
Yeah.
What can we do about this? That's the important thing, right? What can we do
Yeah.
about this? Because the risk is there. It's absolutely there. And if you talk to people who aren't just like me, think boys trying to be Bitcoin philosophers, but people who actually know stuff, like coders, people who actually built this protocol, they will agree with you, and they will understand that, yeah, we are not out of the waters. There are a lot of things that could go wrong here. And the hijacking of the ecosystem is definitely one of them. So what can we do? Well, if we have had a few internal battles in Bitcoin before, the block size wars being one of the most famous ones. Now we have the core versus not debate, which is much more nuanced and interesting. But the block size wars in 2017, that proved something to us. That was a very important war that we had in Bitcoin. And what it told us a few things. It told us, one, that miners aren't the ones who decide what Bitcoin is going to be. And it told us that the node runners, people who actually use Bitcoin, are the ones who decide what Bitcoin is going to be. And so that is exactly what we need to do. We need to protect the protocol by running nodes and by using Bitcoin, being a Bitcoiner, and you contribute to in whatever way that you feel is appropriate for you, to whatever degree that you feel is, however you feel like contributing. And whether that is hodling Bitcoin, fine. If you want to run a node, fantastic. If you feel like spending sats and actually using Bitcoin as, or adopting a personal hyper-Bitcoinized, or being on a personal Bitcoin standard is what I'm trying to say. If you want to be on a personal Bitcoin standard, terrific, perfect. That's the greatest contribution you are probably ever going to make to humanity besides having children. Run a node and try to use Bitcoin as often as possible. I pretty much only accept Bitcoin for payments that are outside of my fiat job for any service I provide. So yeah, run a node, accept Bitcoin, pay in Bitcoin, and engage with Bitcoiners.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Signal. In a world drowning in noise, signal is everything. Most people are overwhelmed, distracted, and deceived, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've lost the ability to discern what truly matters. But signal cuts through the noise. And Bitcoin is pure signal. It doesn't promise. It doesn't lie. It doesn't bend to opinion or propaganda. It just is. And as the world descends into even more chaos, distraction, and distortion, your ability to identify signal, to recognize what's real, true, and timeless will be one of your greatest assets. So stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay tuned, because here on The Signal, we don't follow trends, we follow truth. I'm Dr. Satoshi, and in a world of noise, we are the signal.